There's been a lot of Coach Davis slander lately with the non-con losses, and we won't stand for it on this podcast, but don't just take my advice on it. Listen to some former players.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Thursday, December 26, 2024, Boxing Day. Anybody out there celebrating Boxing Day? Way to go if you are. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making us your first listen or watch. Man, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I want to say a big welcome to our everydayers who are joining us, the Locked On Tar Heels insiders and our Locked On Tar Heels Discord members. Welcome in. Let's get going. Who is coming up on the show today? I want to ask this question. Who is to blame for the slow starts? We've talked about the slow starts ad nauseum, but it feels like there's been a lot of putting it at the feet of Coach Davis. Want to try to answer that question. And another question, actually heard Theo Pinson recently pose this on one of his podcasts. He asked Justin Jackson, if North Carolina plays like second half North Carolina, can they win the ACC? Interesting. And turn our attention to football a little bit. Coach Belichick said last week on College Game Day that he's trying to emulate Coach Sabin's plans, but it sounds like it's a bit of a full circle moment. We'll unpack all of that coming up at the end of the show. But first, the Coach Davis slander. Yikes. It's funny. My audition reel for Locked On, getting the Locked On Tar Heels job was actually, I did a segment in Coach Davis's first year, me talking about needing to exercise patience with Coach Davis. It's his first year and all of this stuff, and things are gonna get going better, and they certainly did, right? Like that panned out very well. But that is, let me admit my own bias right out of the gate. That is going to be my default, is to be more patient than quick twitch. And part of that is I think we are very quick to blame coaches on things when it's not always on the coaching or about the coaching. And here we find ourselves again with that, because let me tell you, in the aftermath of these 5 losses that Carolina has seen, in the aftermath even of some of the close win, like the UCLA win, I have seen, whether it's comments on my live postcasts, whether it's people tweeting at me or DMing me or whatever, a lot of, man, like, this is Coach Davis's fault. Fire Hubert Davis. Coach Davis is on the hot seat. And I got to be honest, you guys, I got no time for that. And I want to talk about it specifically in terms of Carolina's slow starts, because what you're seeing right now, specific to the slow starts, is not a coaching issue. Now, let me say in the same breath that while I am, my disposition is to be patient in moments like this, and truthfully with players as well. If there is a coaching issue, a coaching problem, an X and O problem, whatever, I'm going to talk about it. You guys know, while I'm a glass half full person, I am honest. I will talk about what my eyeballs are seeing or what the stats are telling me if it needs to be talked about. But in this case, I do not believe this is a Hubert Davis issue specific to the slow starts. Don't believe me? Listen to some Tar Heels, and not just like random people. We're talking national champions. Theo Pinson, Justin Jackson, Ray Felton, for crying out loud. Recently, on one of Theo's podcasts, his producer said they were talking about something, and the producer asked them, hey, while we're on that, they're talking about the slow starts. He said, what do you think the head coach, meaning Hubert Davis, can do to stop these slow starts? And before anybody else can answer, Theo, kind of under his breath, says, it doesn't have nothing to do with him. I love it, man. Theo just out here shutting it down before anybody can even get going on it. But then Ray Felton chimes in and says this. In situations like this, it's hard to put it on the coach. Right out of the gate, same thing. Ray shutting it down. At the end of the day, it's us as players that got to go out there and give effort. That's something that you didn't have with us. We were going to give effort on defense. We were going to play hard. That's something you can't coach. You can't coach effort. I can't say that's Hubert's fault with this situation. You can't coach effort. I'm sorry. That's something that's in you as a player. Theo came back around on it a little bit later, and he said, they've shown that they're a good team, meaning this year's Tar Heels. They've shown that they can compete at a high level. It's not coaching. I don't know how many times I got to say it. I don't know how many times we need to hear Theo and Ray say it. It's not on Coach Davis in terms of these slow starts. The beginning of the game, Theo says, is not coaching. If we're the coaches and they start slow, what are we going to do about it? All we can do is say, yo, y'all got to play harder in the first half. Y'all see what happens when you do go play hard. You can win a game. You can compete at a high level. And then he goes on to say, there's not but so much you can do as the coach. It just comes within the locker room for you to make the next jump and for you to make that next step to start better. And look, within slow starts, I think that there are things a coach can do, right? Like you tweak lineups, you tweak maybe plays you're running, things like that. But ultimately, I'm right with Theo and right with Ray. I love what they're saying here. Coach Davis talks all the time about effort and intensity, and this is part of it. Because clearly it's within you to do it at the high level because you're seeing it in the second half, game after game after game. And that version of the Tar Heels, man, is scary and a team that nobody in this country wants to face, particularly as Carolina leans more into these 4-guard lineups. So give it to me. But guys, figure it out. Got to be able to do it. And I know there's the size and I know there's some other things. It just doesn't matter. And so what's interesting to me is that these former players, these national champion players, put the issue with the slow starts squarely on the players to step up and not the coach in any way. They take the blame off of Coach Davis, off of the staff. And these are guys that knows what it takes. So what is it then? You know, what is it these players need to do if it's on the players? Theo goes back to it and he says, quote, our guards have proven because we came back in every game, we played well every game. Our consistency is just bad. A consistency issue. He goes on to say, we can't put two halves together. They have told on themselves. You have showed everyone that you can play with the best. You've shown that. Florida is a good team. Kansas is a good team. Auburn, you competed against Auburn. Auburn can compete as a national champion. Alabama is a national championship type of team. But everyone else that we have played are beatable because we have shown it. We have the guard play to do it. All it is intensity and want to and willingness to put everything on the line, end quote. Theo is spot on, man. This is brilliant. It's about consistency. He said that in that answer. It's about, I lost my spot there. Intensity, consistency and intensity, man. And if you can marry those two things together, watch out. I'm just saying, like, it's so good. And clearly, because Carolina is competing with these teams. Kansas, you think of them in high regard. Carolina could have beaten them on their home court. Florida, clearly a great basketball team. Carolina probably should have won that basketball game. And as I've said multiple times, you know, we've talked a lot about these I know we're talking about the starts of games right now. We've also talked ad nauseum about the inability to close late, Carolina's inability to win basketball games. I'll tell you this much. If they started and played the whole game the way they did the second half, you wouldn't even have to worry about those end of games because then you're up by 8, 10, maybe 15 points at the end of the games because Carolina legitimately, second half Carolina, spread out over a whole game, could be that much better than a Florida, than a Kansas, than a Michigan State, than a Dayton, than a UCLA. Then you're not stressed and sweating at the end of games. So I'm really grateful to these guys for putting this out there, man. This is not on the head coach of the Tar Heels. This is on the players being more consistent and being more intense. Bring it. Let's go. I'll talk about this on tomorrow's show, on Friday's show. But for me, I don't just want to see that against Louisville next week on New Year's Day when Carolina opens up the main chunk of ACC play. I want to see it Sunday against Campbell. Come out and just boat race those camels, right? Like that's what we're looking for. All right. Interesting. As part of this whole conversation on Theo's podcast that we've been talking about, a little bit later, Theo asked Justin Jackson, hey, if Carolina played like the second half version of Carolina for full games, are they good enough to win the ACC? Ooh, that's an intriguing conversation. I want to get my answer to that in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, the NFL playoffs, they're almost here. Isn't that crazy? Man, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers, you can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. What I love about FanDuel is it's not just like the spread or the over-under, man. They got all these different ways for you to pick up a W. A lot of fun and creative lines as well. Got the Fenway Bowl coming up on Saturday, Carolina against UConn up there in Boston. Sure, you got your standard spread. The Tar Heels are favored in this game by 2.5 points. But some of the other lines, you can take like just Carolina's point total over-under. It's 27.5 is the line that FanDuel is given. Or you can look at the first drive result for Carolina. So offensive touchdown for Tar Heels first drive, plus 195. I love that they specify offensive touchdown so that it's like if Carolina's first drive ends in a UConn pick six, you don't get credit for that. Field goal attempt, plus 480. A punt, plus 115. Any other result is plus 600. Man, that's super cool. If you want to go get in on that action or anything else, go to FanDuel.com to join today for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. In the midst of that whole conversation we were just referencing between Theo Pinson and Justin Jackson and Ray Felton, they're talking about the second half version of Carolina that we've seen so often this year. And Theo kind of pauses and he says, hey, Justin, if North Carolina plays an entire game like we've seen them do in the second half, is that a team that's good enough to win the ACC? He just says, do they win the ACC? I want to ask it a little less definitively, like, is that team good enough to win the ACC? Because the problem is, in this day and age of unbalanced schedules and all this stuff, like it's so much more difficult to look at it in those regards. So let me answer, can they? And then I'll answer, will they? Can they? Absolutely. Look, I know that the size is not there. I know, and I mean that both in terms of the front court and, the ad nauseum, the conversation about the backcourt being too small. Fine, whatever. You have proven it with what you have against Kansas, against Michigan State, against part of the Auburn game, against Florida. The almighty SEC, Carolina has done it with them. Beat UCLA, beat Dayton, skinnier teeth, but you won. You won those games. So can Carolina win the ACC? Yes. The problem is, have they shown, we just said consistency in the last segment, have they shown the consistent ability to do that? Not even just game to game, but half to half? No, they haven't. But friends, if Carolina could figure that out, man, if they could figure out how to be that for an entire game, come on. Ceiling is the roof, baby. MJ's in the house. Let's get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is very, very possible. Now, the question is, will they? Let's talk about it. Carolina right now is 1-0. It was an ugly 1-0, but it was a 1-0 win over Georgia Tech at home earlier in December. So remaining in the ACC, 9 more home games and 10 on the road. As you look about the difficulty of the ACC right now, as I record this, the ACC has 6 teams in the Ken Pom top 50. Obviously, Carolina is one of those, so there are 5 other teams. Carolina plays those 5 teams a total of 7 times. Duke, number 2 at Ken Pom, they play them twice. Pitt, 25th at Ken Pom, play them twice. Clemson, 31st at Ken Pom, play them just once on the road. SMU, up to 39th at Ken Pom, man. SMU, just crashing the party in football, basketball, everything. I love it. Play them only at home. And then Louisville is 50th, play them only on the road. So 4 of those 7 games on the road, 3 at home. In some regard, I kind of like that so many of those are on the road. You feel like maybe you could get more of them if they were at home, but the fact that they're on the road gives you a little bit of it gives you more space in your quad opportunities because a road game, the team can be ranked lower and still be quad one. So like at home, quad one is 1 to whatever. It's not coming to my brain right now. Hang on. I've got my little note where I always keep it. At home, quad one is 1 to 30. On the road, quad one is 1 to 75. So you give yourself a little more leeway with that when you're on the road. So you got 7 games against the other teams that are top 50 at KenPom, 7 of your 20 ACC games. Outside of that, your other 13, it's like, okay, so you got to do the Lord's work in those 13 other games, because I think for Carolina to be able to win the ACC, there have been 4 years where the ACC has had 20, prior to this season, there have been 4 seasons where the ACC had 20 game schedule. Supposed to be 5, but the 2020-21 season still getting out of COVID and there weren't a full 20 game schedule. Anyway, in those 4 seasons, the teams that have won the ACC regular season were either 17-3, Carolina last year, 15-5, or 16-4. Those have been the 3 records. So somewhere from 15-5 to 17-3 is good enough to win the ACC. 15-5 has literally gotten second every year of the 20 game, ACC era. So Carolina, those 7 games, let's say outside of those 7 games against the other teams that are top 50 at KenPom, let's say you go 12-1 in those, maybe you have a hiccup somewhere. That allows you to, if you can go 3-4 in these 7 games, that puts you at 15-5. At worst, at that point, you're second in the ACC, right? Like you can see how that could come together. And let's be honest, the ACC is not what the SEC is or the Big 12 is right now. It's just not. There's some teams that are really good, like Duke is right now playing, they've got Final Four potential. Carolina could. They've just got to put it together. We've just not seen it again consistently. So Carolina, if they could pull off winning 3 of those 7 games, and you get 3 of them at home, you get Pitt at home, you get Duke at home, and you get SMU at home. If you could win those 3, even if you drop those 4 road games and then go 12-1 against the teams in the ACC that are outside the top 50 at KenPom, you go 15-5, right? Like that maths for me. Part of the issue though is, listen to this stretch. This starts in late January, goes through early February. At Pitt. Actually, let me pull up the actual schedule and give you the dates of it, because it's wild to think through. Okay. Tuesday, January 28th at Pitt. That's Saturday, February 1st at Duke. Get a week off, thankfully, but then the next Saturday, February 8th, host Pitt. That Monday, quick turnaround at Clemson, and then that next Saturday at Syracuse. Syracuse is not great, but that's another road trip after, like on the back end of at Pitt, at Duke versus Pitt, at Clemson. That's your toughest 5-game stretch of the ACC right there. Carolina is going to have to navigate that stretch well. But similar to the non-con, we can't get stressed out and worried if it doesn't go perfectly in that stretch. So can Carolina win the ACC? Absolutely. Will they? I just gave you the path, and it's possible. It's possible. But they got to get the consistency and intensity that we just talked about in the last second. Legitimately, if Carolina can find it within themselves to play at second half levels for 40 minutes, at worst, you are a top 4 ACC team with a double bye, and you're golden. At best, in that scenario, you're back-to-back ACC regular season champions. And you can see the wheels just starting to turn even more and more and more. Like, for example, Ian Jackson, after the UCLA game on Tar Heel Sports Network on Saturday, he was asked about how Carolina made the comeback. And I love this. I wrote this quote down, and I've been holding it to be able to use today. He said, quote, "We chipped away. We didn't try to make the home run play, and we rebounded and got stops down the stretch," end quote. This dude gets it, man. I love it. Coach Rob, a couple weeks ago, talked about this exact thing. When you're down big, you cannot I think the way he said it was, you can't hit a grand slam with nobody on base. You just got to score, get a stop. Score, give up a bucket, score, get a stop, right? Like just doing the incremental things to get yourself back in the game. And then listen to that defense, man. We rebounded. Remember, we talked, oh gosh, I can't remember, in some show this week about the difference in, I think it must have been Monday's show, the difference in what allowed Carolina to win the UCLA game that lost them the Florida game. Florida gave up all of those offensive rebounds late against UCLA, did not give up an offensive rebound for the final 10 and a half minutes of the game. That is going to win. And to hear Ian getting all that, man, that's part of what makes me believe this Carolina team is going to keep figuring it out. And then another part of it for me of really getting to the point of like, hey, this team could win the ACC is getting that personnel stuff nailed down. I want to go back to something else Ray Felton said on that podcast. He said, quote, "We're going to struggle because we have two small guards," meaning Elliot and RJ. "You look at competitive teams, they've got big guards, but it's hard to put RJ or Elliot on the bench as a starter. But for me, to win my games, to control what I need to control, I need big guards. I need Jackson," meaning Ian Jackson. "I need Powell, Drake Powell. I need these guys to play big minutes for me." So this is a national champion point guard saying this thing. It's not about Ian and Elliot going, or excuse me, RJ and Elliot going to the bench. It's about figuring out how to, as the season wears on, get more and more and more minutes for Ian and Drake. Why? Because they have that positional size that Carolina needs that they don't have when it's Elliot and RJ in the game. And if you put 6'5" Ian Jackson in the game, you're in much better shape. The problem is, you wish that was a fifth-year RJ Davis at 6'5". All right, that would be why. Of course, if RJ Davis was 6'5", he wouldn't be in Chapel Hill anymore. That's the only reason, or part of the reason he's still around. But I love that from from Ray Felton. So really good stuff there. Can Carolina win this thing? Absolutely. But they got to keep getting to that consistency and that intensity that we talked about in the last segment. Now, who knows how things are going to turn out with the Bill Belichick experiment with Carolina football, but my man is saying and doing all the right things, including emulating college football royalty. I'll tell you more about what I mean in just a second. Right after I tell you about Game Time, man, you guys, I love going to college basketball games. You know how much I love this sport, but particularly at the holiday season, man. It's so festive. It's so fun. I'm remembering back to 2 years ago, went to the CBS Sports Classic. The first time was at Madison Square Garden. I mean, just the holiday spirit, man, was so great. While we were there, we took our kids to see the Rockettes. And that's what's great about an opportunity like Game Time, who has tickets for great seats for events like college basketball or the Rockettes or anything else live, man. So Game Time is a great thing to check out. Best deals at the best seats. Game Time is focused this holiday season on togetherness. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better. And it's the perfect gift, man. I know Christmas passed yesterday, but maybe you're a little bit late and you need to get a quick thing. Snatch up some tickets on Game Time. I was looking ahead to the Fenway Bowl that Carolina's in on Saturday, the bowl game at Fenway. Pretty rad. You can get tickets for as low as $40, but here's what I think is cool, man. They've got seats just like during a baseball game up on the Green Monster. Go check those tickets out, man. How cool would that be to take in a football game from the Green Monster? Pretty cool. Well, if you want to do that, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download their app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's Game Time. I've been meaning to talk about this all week on the show, and basketball just keeps getting in the way, which is never a bad thing because I always want to talk about basketball. But last Friday, ahead of the first college football playoff game, Indiana and Notre Dame, Coach Belichick was on College Game Day. But dude, I love how he's just popping up everywhere, man. Just keep raising this national profile. First off, that's great for the program. It's great for getting fans involved, getting casual football fans interested in what's going on, getting, perhaps most importantly, recruits interested in what Coach Belichick is building. So I love all that. But while he was on, Coach Belichick talked about how he intends to work at basically replicating what Nick Saban did at Alabama, what made the Tide so successful in the Nick Saban tenure. And give me all of that. Here's what he said. Quote, I watched Coach Saban put together his scouting and evaluation staff at Alabama. Now, I'm copying a lot of things that I watched him do there. I'm learning from the system that he installed there. Will get players ready for the NFL, no matter what position they play, very much like Nick Saban did at Alabama, end quote. First off, I love it, man. Just anytime you're emulating what like one of the best dynasties in the history of college football did, that's a good thing to do. Secondly, these players that have NFL aspirations, the opportunity to come learn from an NFL coach who specifically is saying, we are going to get you ready for the NFL. I don't care what position you play, punter, linebacker, receiver, quarterback, whatever, come here and we're going to prep you. But here's what was so interesting about this replication of Nick Saban's system. Coach Saban, obviously on the game day set now, retorted to what Coach Belichick said, quote, it must have been pretty easy to copy our model at Alabama since it was your model, end quote. So here's what's wild about this. Coach Belichick is talking about replicating what Coach Saban did at Alabama. And Coach Saban's like, I was just taking what you did and trying to do that. And so A, that's just funny. B, that means that what Coach Saban was doing in Tuscaloosa is like the brainchild of our head coach. Our head coach is not taking it secondhand from anyone. He is the inventor. He is the brain trust, and he can do it again. And so I know there is doubt and skepticism, and from outside people we're being laughed at. Let them. Maybe this doesn't go well. And it might, especially, year one, you're still getting stuff figured out. I'm struggling to see how this is going to go poorly. It may not be Carolina is suddenly elite in college football. Maybe not. I don't know. But I just don't see how it goes poorly. At the very worst, going to be a ton of talent coming in. And I can't wait to start seeing what both transfer portal and high school recruiting classes, and apparently now international recruits, are looking like. Now, another thing. This is really intriguing to me. I've wondered a lot about this. Also on game day that night, he was asked, are you worried that players will leave if you coach too hard? Because I think there is this fear of like, hey, with professional NFL athletes, they're being paid literal millions of dollars and have signed a contract saying that they're going to play for you and do what you tell them to do. And this is your life. With college football players, that's something of a new and novel concept of being paid lots of money to play this game. But it's not the only part of your life at this point, because you're also a student. You're a student athlete. And with football, unlike basketball, you can't be one and done. You have to be at least 3 years in the program before you can go to the NFL. And there's not, contracts. It's just, that's part of what makes it so wild, wild westy, right? Is it's got some of the NFL without all the structure of the NFL. And that's bad. Anyway, here's Coach Belichick's response. And I thought it was really, really interesting and is maybe signaling and indicating subtle shifts changing in the wild, wild west landscape, maybe making it less so. Coach Belichick says this, that's changing too. There are contracts. I don't think giving players money and then they leave is really going to happen based on the way contracts are written now. Whew, that's encouraging. Whether it's school money or NIL money, with each passing year, this new era of college football is becoming a little more organized. There's more of a system in place. I know there's some things that still need to be worked out in the courts, but it's becoming closer to the NFL model. Players aren't unionized. That's a big difference between the NFL. However, fundamentally, the evaluations, what players receive in compensation, and what their value is to the team are similar to the NFL, but the payments are lower. when I was with the Cleveland Browns and we went to see an agency, we had a salary cap of around 16 million, which is about what it is in college now in terms of revenue share. It's come full circle. You know what that tells me? This is a guy that's basically working with a budget that he is used to, with a salary cap that he's used to in terms of evaluating and getting the players in what they need. And that's Mike Lombardi's job, by the way, is to do that for Coach Belichick. But I like to hear him talking about how the tide is slowly turning in the direction that it needs to, with getting more structure and restriction around NIL and transfer portal and all that stuff. That is going to make this infinitely better than it is right now. And so I think it could be the perfect marriage of such a time as this and Bill Belichick coming to the program. Keep your eyes on it. It's going to be a fun ride. All right, guys, that's it for today's show. Really looking forward to tomorrow, where we're going to preview the Campbell game coming up on Sunday. We're going to preview the bowl game coming up on Saturday. Early kick, 11 a.m. Saturday morning Eastern time against UConn. So make sure you are ready for that. We'll get you ready for it on tomorrow's show. If you haven't subscribed to Locked On Tar Heels on YouTube, do it right now. If you're watching, if you're listening, hop on YouTube, hit boom, subscribe, because it really, really helps us continue to grow the program. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers in 3 years, and we're about 500 away right now with 2 months to go. Would you help us get there? I'm asking you, watcher of the program, go do it right now. Awesome. Thank you. If you're not part of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord or Locked On Tar Heels Insider program, that's a great way to go even deeper with the show, make it more personal for you. The Insider program, you get direct access to texting with me one-on-one and access to all of my data and stats and stuff like that, all sorts of great perks. Those links are in the show notes as well. All right, guys, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk to you again tomorrow to wrap up the week, but until then, peace.